Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. Today I'm going to have a little bit of fun, and using a slightly modified version of my keto sugar cookie recipe, I'm going to make these realistic and scary looking and seasonally appropriate for Halloween severed witch's fingers. By the way, these fingers are as much fun to make as they are to serve on a platter of piled up fingers dripping with oozing raspberry jelly blood. The macronutrient ratio for each cookie is 2.9 to 1, with 2.4 grams of total carbs, 0.4 grams of soluble fiber, 1.3 grams of insoluble fiber, resulting in only 0.7 grams of carbs per severed finger, which also includes the raspberry blood. In order to make these fingers, the first thing you'll need to do is to prepare the full batch of my sugar cookie recipe. But I have made a slight alteration to the ingredients. I have removed the baking soda and baking powder because I don't want the cookies to puff up when they're baking. The rest of the directions and ingredients are exactly the same, and I would recommend that you watch the video for a step-by-step demonstration and some other pointers on how to make your sugar cookie dough just perfect. The link for the sugar cookie recipe will be provided in the description below. For best results, please follow the instructions I'm providing. And just for laughs, because it's Halloween, at the end of this video I will show you a blooper with one of my unsuccessful but delicious failed attempts, in which I ended up with ogre fingers instead of scrawny witch's fingers. The second step you also have to do for this recipe is to use my cooked raspberry jelly and cake glaze, which is keto, sugar-free, and gluten-free. The link for that will also be provided in the description below. After making the full batch of jelly, and while the jelly is still hot, pass everything through a sieve to remove all the raspberry seeds. You'll have to stir and press down as you mash the cooked jelly through the sieve. The total amount of raspberry jelly I used was about 28 teaspoons, or 1 teaspoon per cookie. When you've done this, set the jelly aside on your counter. By the way, because this makes more than just the 28 teaspoons, you can save the rest in a glass jar in the refrigerator or freeze the extra jelly for future projects. Okay, so let's get started. Now for the fun part, to shape the witch's fingers. First I weighed my total dough and divided the weight by 28. That will give me the exact weight per each cookie ball. Then taking one of the balls, roll it into a tube of about 3 inches or 8 centimeters long, or about the length of your middle finger. Lay each of your tubes, as you make them, onto a parchment-lined cookie sheet. I like to arrange the fingers into 2 neat rows, which will make it much easier to shape each finger. Now to shape each finger. Take one of the tubes and pinch the dough at the 1/3 mark for each end of the tube. As you're pinching, press the dough inward towards the center to make a larger knuckle joint. Using your fingers and very little pressure, lightly roll to smooth out the pinched area, but leave the pinched area looking a bit irregular. The fingers should look very gnarled, and at one end, round the top of the fingertip. And the next step is to add the nails. For each finger, take 1 whole blanch almond and insert the rounded end of the almond into the nail bed by pressing the almond into the dough, embedding the almond in this way so a bit of the almond is actually just under the cookie dough, will form a cuticle and prevent the almond nail from falling off. Repeat until all the almond fingernails have been added. Next, to make the fingers look a bit more realistic, we're going to show where the finger joints are. Using a sharp knife, make 2 small straight cuts. This is the one nearest the nail bed. To make the marks for the knuckle joint, I found it easiest to use a small teaspoon. I make 2 rounded indentations at either end of the knuckle joint. Place the spoon in the center and roll the spoon to either side on the top, like I'm showing here. Then using your knife again, cut a straight line between the 2 curved indentations. This forms the center part of the knuckle. If your dough is getting too soft and sticky, place the cookie sheet with all the fingers or tubes into the refrigerator for 30 to 60 minutes. That's because when the dough is chilled, it's much easier to work with. Now repeat and do the same for all of the rest of the fingers. When all 28 of your fingers are scored and you've placed them back on the parchment-lined baking sheet, refrigerate the tray of fingers for a minimum of 6 hours, but for best results, refrigerate overnight. Chilling the cookie dough this long will prevent the fingers from expanding during baking. and will keep the fingers looking whiter and scarier. When you're ready to bake, and before taking the tray out of the refrigerator, preheat your oven to 175 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Place the tray of fingers in the middle position of your preheated oven and bake exactly for 10 minutes. It's really important that you do not overbake these cookies, so immediately remove the tray from the oven when the timer goes off. The cookies will look raw when you first remove them from the oven, but that's exactly how they should look. Next, take a hold of the parchment and slide the parchment with the cookies on top onto your cooling rack. Do not handle or touch the cookies until the cookies are completely cooled to room temperature. So just admire them, but don't touch. After the fingers are completely cool, we add the final touches. To make the witch's fingers look a bit grimy, take about a half a teaspoon of cocoa powder, dip the tip of a dry brush into the cocoa, then dab the tip of the brush around the nail bed and the two cut ends of the nail, and also add some cocoa powder to all the cuts for the two joint areas. Also, with a bit of cocoa still left on your brush, brush the sides of the fingers as well. I like the presentation of these witch's fingers, and I think they look really scary. And you'd be perfectly fine to serve them just like this. However, if you want to make them even scarier looking and gorier, by adding some blood using my cooked keto raspberry jelly. To add the blood to the severed end, just dip that severed end into the clear raspberry jelly. And as you're pulling out, scoop out a bit of jelly so that it stays on the end. This will make it look like the blood is still dripping. Whether you serve these amazing severed witch's fingers with or without blood, I think your guests will really think they're fun. Happy Halloween. Now, as promised, here's the blooper. For one of my test versions, before I figured out that I should remove the leavening agent, as you can see, the fingers really puffed up a lot. They look much more like fat ogre fingers. Not exactly like bony witch's fingers. But the nice part about this fail, the cookies were absolutely delicious, and my family did suffer through having to eat them. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you come back to see the next one, when I'll be showing you how to make Shrek and Fiona's Rats on a Stick. The link for the modified printable keto sugar cookie recipe for these severed witch's fingers, as well as the other recipes mentioned, will be provided in the description below.